Have you ever wondered how a typical day can suddenly turn into a horrifying nightmare? It was a day like any other in Sydney until it wasn't. The bustling Westfield shopping centre in Bondi Junction, a hub of everyday life, became the stage for an unthinkable act of violence. A 40-year-old man, Joel Cauchi, embarked on a deadly rampage, wielding a knife as his weapon of choice. His victims were chosen not at random, but with a chilling specificity. He targeted women, marking a dark day in the fight for gender equality and safety. 6 innocent lives were lost on that fateful day. Among them were a designer, an architect, a student, an entrepreneur's daughter, a volunteer surf lifesaver, and a new mother. Each one of them had a story, a life full of dreams and a future that was brutally cut short. The shopping centre, once filled with the sounds of life and laughter, was plunged into a state of chaos and terror. But even in the midst of the horror, humanity showed its resilience. A Pakistani security guard, despite the imminent danger, tried to intervene and stop the attacker. He too lost his life in the process, leaving behind a legacy of courage and selflessness. As the terror unfolded, a ray of hope emerged in the form of Inspector Amy Scott. Inspector Amy Scott, a name that will forever be etched in the memories of the people of Sydney. A senior officer attached to the Eastern Suburbs Police Command, she was just a stone's throw away from the bustling Westfield shopping centre when the unimaginable horror began to unfold. As the chaos ensued, Inspector Scott did not hesitate. With a sense of duty that far outweighed the fear, she made her way into the epicentre of the catastrophe. Alone, she sprinted through the top level of the complex, her heart pounding in her chest with each step. Her mission was clear: to confront the menace that was causing such terror and devastation, and confront him she did. Standing before her was Joel Cauchi, a 40-year-old man wielding a 30-centimetre knife, his face twisted with a rage that had already claimed too many innocent lives. Time seemed to slow as she yelled at him to put down his weapon, but Cauchi lunged at her instead, his eyes wild, the sharp blade of his knife glinting ominously. With a sense of grim determination, Inspector Scott acted. Her training kicked in, and she fired her weapon, hitting Cauchi in the chest. He crumpled to the ground, his reign of terror brought to an abrupt end by a single decisive shot. But Inspector Scott's actions didn't stop there. Opening. What would you do after shooting down a knife-wielding man? Imagine the scene. A shopping centre turned into a battlefield, a knife-wielding man on a rampage, and you a police inspector, the only one standing between him and the innocent bystanders. The decision to pull the trigger is never an easy one, but for Inspector Amy Scott, it was a necessary act of duty. But her work didn't stop there. After firing the fatal shot that ended the bloodshed, Inspector Scott found herself in a scene of utter chaos. With the victims lying on the ground around her, there was no time for her to process what had just happened. She didn't pause to catch her breath or steady her shaking hands. Instead, she dove right back into her duty, performing CPR on the very man she had just shot, as well as other victims scattered across the shopping centre floor. It wasn't about whether the man deserved her mercy or not. It was about doing everything within her power to save as many lives as she could. It was about being a police officer, a protector, a lifeline in the midst of unimaginable terror. Backup arrived, and amid the sirens and flashing lights, the man who had caused so much pain and suffering was pronounced dead at the scene. But even then, Inspector Scott didn't falter. She remained at the scene, offering help where she could, providing comfort to the traumatized and ensuring that the area was secure. Closing. Despite the ordeal, Inspector Scott remained humble. She didn't see herself as a hero who had just saved countless lives. To her, she was simply doing her job, fulfilling her duty to protect and serve. And in doing so, she showed us what it truly means to go beyond the call of duty. How does one feel after such a life-altering incident? As we delve into the aftermath of this tragic event, the heart of our story, Police Inspector Amy Scott, offers us a glimpse into her perspective. According to Kevin Morton, the boss of the Police Association of New South Wales, Inspector Scott is content with her actions on that fateful day. In the wee hours of the morning, Morton and Scott had a conversation that revealed her state of mind. As he recalls, she said, "It was a night with not a lot of sleep. Imagine the whirlwind of emotions she must have felt. Yet, amidst it all, she expressed contentment, a sense of duty fulfilled. And hero? No, she doesn't see herself that way. In her own words, she was simply doing her job. Following the incident, procedure demanded that Inspector Scott be separated from her fellow officers. She underwent a gun residue test, a routine part of the investigative process. As the dust settled and the adrenaline waned, a colleague drove her home, leaving her to digest the enormity of the day's events in solitude. Soon she will face a formal interview as part of the investigation into the deadly stabbings. It's a necessary step, albeit a daunting one. The incident will be dissected, each decision scrutinized, each moment relived. Yet, through it all, Scott maintains a level-headedness that commands respect. But it's not just her courage in the face of danger that is admirable. It's her humility that truly resonates. As she navigates the aftermath of this horrific event, she remains grounded, her focus not on the accolades, but on the duty she performed. Government officials, colleagues, and the public have hailed her as a hero, but to Inspector Scott, she was just doing her job, and she was content with that. It's this humility, this dedication to service over self, that makes her a true embodiment of courage. Inspector Scott's humility resonated with those around her. Even though she doesn't consider herself a hero, the nation thinks otherwise. The outpouring of admiration and respect for Inspector Amy Scott has been extraordinary. Police Minister Yasmin Catley was one of the first to express her gratitude, speaking with Inspector Scott just hours after the incident. She described the officer as humble, thanking her on behalf of the government and people of New South Wales for her courage. New South Wales Police Commissioner Karen Webb also praised Inspector Scott for her enormous courage and bravery, assuring that she was doing well under the circumstances. The tributes didn't stop there. From Prime Minister Anthony Albanese to New South Wales Premier Chris Minns and even the Prince and Princess of Wales, a flood of commendations hailed Inspector Scott's brave actions. The online world was no different. Unmasked and hailed as a national hero, Inspector Scott was lauded for her fearlessness and quick response. "How many lives did she save today? Brave," one person posted. Another added, "Absolute legend, didn't even hesitate." Others called for her to receive a bravery award, and some even touted her as a potential Australian of the Year. Let's not forget that this isn't the first time Inspector Scott has been recognised for her acts of courage. Back in 2019, she was a sergeant stationed at nearby King's Cross, when she was recognised at the Rotary Club Police Officer of the Year award ceremony. She received the Demonstrated Courage and Devotion to Duty Award, an early testament to her bravery and commitment to her duty. For Inspector Scott, her actions on that fateful day were nothing more than her doing her job. But for the rest of us, they were a shining example of courage under pressure, of selfless service, and of the very best of humanity. Inspector Amy Scott, a humble servant of the law, a beacon of courage, and a true hero in the eyes of a grateful nation.